Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, 7 Principles of Highly Effective Command Centers. This event brought to you by Security Magazine is sponsored by Everbridge. I am your moderator, Maria Henriquez, Associate Editor of Security Magazine. Thank you for joining us. Today's presenter joining us from Everbridge are Scott Morrison, Vice President of CEM Solutions, and Tracy Reinhold, Chief Security Officer. At Everbridge, Scott is responsible for delivering and go-to-market strategies for Everbridge Critical Event Management Platform, which includes its Command Center software, Visual Command Center. Tracy Reinhold is responsible for advancing Everbridge's enterprise-level security strategy, as well as working closely with customers and partners to optimize their organizational approach to managing and responding to critical events. Don't forget to submit your questions, and later in the program, our presenter will address as many as possible. Today's event is being recorded and archived on securitymagazine.com. And now I am excited to turn it over to today's presenters, Scott and Tracy.
Great. Thanks, Maria. And thanks, everyone, for joining the webinar today. This is Scott Morrison speaking. My partner on this webinar, Tracy Reinhold, who is the Chief Security Officer of Everbridge, will be walking through the 7 principles of highly effective command centers. So just to give you a brief look at who we are, there's a picture of both Tracy and myself. He's much better looking than I am. And with that, Tracy, I don't know if you want to say any opening words, because this will be we'll be doing this as a dialogue and kind of going back and forth. So Tracy, I don't know if you want any opening comments.
Great. No, thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. And obviously the check cleared since you said I'm better looking than you. Looking forward to today. I think that this is a great opportunity to share best practices and hopefully solicit some great questions from the audience so that we can all learn together.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. So before we get into the 7 principles, just wanted to provide a little context for the discussion. So, a lot of us that are on this call that are interested in these 7 principles are probably, for their various organizations, dealing with different types of events that could be, that could impact life safety, they could impact business continuity, a variety of different types of things. But in the end, these are events that for our organization might be deemed as critical because of the impact that they might have. And so, when we're dealing with these events, whether, it's a physical event, a man-made event, like an active shooter or a weather event, or even an event that might be an IT outage or some type of a cyber attack or digital disruption. The way that organizations deal with these events is often disjointed. And so that the reason for today's webinar is really to try to put some order and process around a process that sometimes can be very, very challenging. The reason why is, as we'll get into, is that many times, trying to get the information in a timely manner and work across various silos in an organization to try to understand, what's going on and then how to deal with it is often where a lot of the challenges are. And so in order to properly deal with these types of events, we really identified kind of 4 key areas that are needed. When dealing with these types of events, what we want to do is we want to know as early as possible about what are those potential threats or disruptions are to the organization. We want to then quickly be able to kind of assess and know the situation and really answer the question, do I care? Do I care about this? Is this something that could impact my organization, my people, my operations? And then once I know that I've got a situation that I care about, I need to quickly know what to do and be able to take decisive action into mitigating that. And then finally, we need the ability to look and say, well, how did it go? And were our actions successful? And how did we do? Tracy, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the know early is really about utilizing intelligence and the sources that we have. So one of the challenges is the overload of information that comes in. So intelligence is great, but intelligence that hasn't been curated and deconflicted actually adds to the problem of the disjointed response. So I think, from a security practitioner's perspective, getting the right intelligence early and being able to sift through that either through AI or machine learning is a huge advantage in letting a team be better prepared to address the challenges that they're going to face.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Tracy. And, we're going to look at that, I think, a little deeper and get underneath why that is such a challenge and what are some of the things that we can do about it. So that's a great point. So if these are the things that we need, then, how do we apply those requirements to our 7 principles? And the ultimate goal here is that we understand that these critical events can often be, times of heightened stress, but they don't need to be times of turmoil. And so by applying these command center best practices that we're going to walk through now, we hope that can help you and your organization keep your people safe and your businesses running. So with that, we're going to get into the 7 principles. And I guess as a forward or a preface to that, I wanted to qualify the fact that these concepts that we're going to go through, they apply to organizations with traditional command centers, fusion centers, virtual command centers. It really applies to sort of the command center function. And so there are a variety of different types of command centers. We understand that. And the second point that I think Tracy's going to also talk about is the role of security in an organization is changing. And, more and more we're seeing that security organizations are doing more than just kind of the traditional physical security of making sure that the perimeter is protected and we have our access control, et cetera. And what we want to do is talk about what that means to an organization and how that group can add more value. Tracy, I know you were part of that as organizations that you ran security in elevating the role of security.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is not to myopically look at your role from a security lens. So part of that is elevating the role of the security organization or a CSO within the company. And that's done by first becoming a student of the business, understanding what's important to the organization, and then aligning your security posture so that you enable the business to be successful. I like to say at the end of the day, security's role is to enable the business, is to allow a business to return to revenue or to operate in a safe and secure environment. But that's accomplished by understanding what the core mission is of the organization and then aligning your security principles to enhance that company's ability to be successful.
Great. That's a great point. And that's actually a foreshadowing of what we'll talk about in a few minutes when we get to our first principle. But before we do that, we wanted to just do a quick polling question and ask, number one, do you have a command center? And that might be, and let us know which one or which type if you do. So that could be a traditional command center, like a GSOC or a SOC, a fusion center. It could be a virtual command center, maybe a combination of those, or none of the above. And as we see the polling questions coming in, we appreciate that.
It's interesting, Scott, that, obviously the traditional command center is the most prevalent thing that we're seeing so far. And I think it's interesting to note, too, that command centers don't look the same across the board. Everybody sort of uniquely designs theirs based on their own needs and requirements. But there's no question that that's turning out to be the most significant situation that has arisen during this poll.
Yep. Great point. So yeah, it looks like at least 50% of our audience has a kind of one of those traditional command centers. But even in a traditional command center, as you mentioned, Tracy, they can take on a lot of different shapes and forms. So,
so one of the,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say one of the biggest challenges is focus inside a command center. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but our audience should keep that in mind, is that how do we optimize a command center during times of crisis and during regular business operations?
Yep. Great point. So thank you all for that first polling question. So as we talk about command centers, what we're really trying to do is, as Tracy mentioned, is really kind of help forge a strategic path forward. We have a saying that we like to use, which is to move your command center from the basement to the boardroom. Now, does that mean that your command centers are literally in the basement? Maybe, but maybe not. But the idea is that, oftentimes we see that the command center might be viewed in the organization as a cost center. And what we're really trying to do is bring forth some principles that kind of convert that from being viewed as a cost center to really an enabler for the business, as Tracy said, to what we'll call a take command center as far as helping drive strategy for the organization. So,
all right, Scott, I think you're spot on there. And I think that what Scott's going to talk about throughout this conversation is how we actually effectively manage that process. And part of it is, as we talked about earlier, opening that aperture and making sure that your command center, while it is security focused, can also be leveraged across other lines of business to enhance the business operations of the core company.
Yep, great point. So looking at command centers, the traditional role of a command center is sort of that nerve center, for managing events. It's kind of a rallying place for an incident response. We'll talk about this in a few minutes, but it can often be an integration point from a lot of different things, varying from different systems to processes to, as Tracy mentioned earlier, intel. And oftentimes these command centers are 24/7 operations, but they can be physical or virtual and take on a lot of different forms. Oftentimes when we think of a command center, we think of the military. And many command centers or traditional command centers kind of have their roots in the military. Or we picture like NASA as the big kind of a command and control center. And as Tracy mentioned, they're often in security, but more and more we're seeing command centers in other parts of the organization, supporting functions like social media, monitoring command center, cyber command center, a field operations or services command center, even supply chain command centers, which are often called control towers. So they, as Tracy mentioned, they take on a lot of different forms. But one thing that is consistent is that when your command center doesn't measure up, right, when it's not supporting the mission and the goals of the organization, then your employees could be at risk, your operations could suffer a major disruption, that could cause your customers to lose confidence, and ultimately the value of your organization, your brand, your revenues could be at risk when this happens. So that's going to take us to our first principle, which we alluded to earlier, and Tracy talked about mission. And the first real principle of highly effective command centers is really to position yourself to achieve your mission. And so in order to do that, you have to understand what the mission is and what it supports. So it could range from security to other types of function in the organization. And I know, Tracy, you've talked about kind of understanding, what a company's core business is. Maybe give an example of what that might be for a command center so that they understand kind of how they align themselves to, to the mission of their company and their core business.
Yep. So what we don't want to do is confuse the corporate security mission with the mission of the organization. And I'll give you a real life example. When I was a CSO at a major financial institution, one of the challenges that we had was during Hurricane Harvey, and we needed to determine our potential loss from unpaid mortgages. It was actually our command center, through utilizing technology, it was able to geo-map all of the unpaid loan balances in our two main portfolios and provide that information to the core business before the leaders of those segments of the organization were able to determine the potential loss. So what that did in effect was change the way that the organization looked at the command center from where they used to look at it before, where it was myopically focused on security. By providing that value and understanding what was important to the organization, the command center was able to rapidly assess the situation and determine a go-forward path for the core business.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. And that is, I think, one of the ways we're going to talk about later is how you can elevate the role of your command center to support the overall core business and do that in a lot of different ways. So with that, let's go to our second poll question here and just ask the participants quickly, what is the mission of your command center? And you can check all of those that would apply.
You know, Scott, it's interesting. We're seeing, quite a bit of diversity in what the command centers are used for, and I think a lot of it is what's the primary use and secondary or tertiary use. As we look forward to what our respondents have to say, it's interesting that still physical security is the number one, but I'm also kind of pleased to see that business continuity is ranking up there pretty high as well.
Yeah, that's great. And that, I think, is one of the areas of opportunity for command centers. So it's good to see that our participants are also supporting business continuity. So that's great. Okay, so thank you again. So the top two were physical security, of course, number one, and business continuity is number two. But also it's nice to see some other areas like supply chain as well. So when we're thinking about our command center and how it deals with these types of events to the business, there's an ecosystem that we notice. And you know, when dealing with these critical events, that ecosystem really relies on, you know, a combination of people, processes, systems, and data. And what's interesting is that oftentimes these elements of this ecosystem for managing critical events, they come together in a command center environment. And so we're going to use this kind of paradigm to talk about the next few principles. So let's first focus on the people that are involved in your critical event management and how those people are impacted and interact with that command center. So that brings us to our second principle, which is you need to identify and cater to your customers. And the reason why the first principle had to do with mission is because the mission of your command center directly impacts who those customers are. And those customers can range from a variety of different stakeholders to the employees or the people that you're protecting, to the operational functions like supply chain that you're supporting, to the other stakeholders like your shareholders, board members, and executives that have a big interest in, you know, how we're responding to these different types of events. Now, Tracy, when you ran a security function, I'm sure a lot of your stakeholders, you had stakeholders all over the organization, especially in the scenario you just described, that were very dependent upon your command center function for key information.
Yeah, so part of principle number two is educating your shareholders or stakeholders about the value that the command center brings forward. So what you don't want to have happen is that the people that are depending on the command center, the first time they ever hear about it is during a time of crisis. So, you know, evangelizing for your own command center and developing executive champions in the lines of business helps when you have to enhance your or upgrade your operations center. So if you focus myopically on security and don't take into consideration what your executive champions need to be successful in their lines of business, then the value of the ops center actually diminishes in the eyes of the company. So evangelizing and educating the workforce about the value of your command center helps you win those people over and make them understand the value that you bring to the organization.
Great. Yep, that's a great observation. So another component about those customers or those people is that most of them are not in the command center. So as Tracy mentioned, you know, evangelizing and making sure that the people outside of that command center understand what your mission is, what you're doing, the value that you bring is really important. And the other thing that is important to recognize is that that because they're not in your command center, they need to receive information about what you're doing in a way that is the most appropriate for where they are and to the appropriate level of detail and appropriate level of timeliness. So for example, if you have a traveling executive, that executive may just need to get a status of what's our current risk profile or threat profile? How are we doing as an organization when it comes to all the different types of threats? And that may need to be delivered in something very, very simple like a tablet device that just gives us a very high level dashboard. You may have customers of your command center that are responding to a particular crisis, and they may have set up a special sort of crisis management or emergency response center, converting a conference room or activating a crisis response center because of a particular event. And they may need to get a different type of information. Or your customer may be a traveler that needs to get that information. Yeah, Tracy.
Yeah, so I think the timely dissemination of information to your stakeholders will keep your command center from getting clogged with incoming calls. So the ability to triage an event and to make sure that you have a tailored message for executives, one for your crisis team, one for your impacted employees. The faster you can get those out, the less you'll get white noise back into your command center, which will prohibit the staff inside the center from doing their actual job. So timely dissemination and the right kind of information disseminated is critical to make sure that the command center can run at its optimal speed.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit about, how do we get information out to our stakeholders and make sure that right information goes out quickly. So that is a great point. So we've talked about the people now in the command center ecosystem. Now we're going to shift over to the right side of this ecosystem, and we're going to talk about systems, and we're going to talk about data. And so with that's going to bring us to our third principle, which is to know early. Remember, earlier we talked about what are those key requirements when dealing with a critical event. And now once we understand our mission and we understand who our customers are, we need to get into sort of the meat of managing a critical event. And so the first step is you need to know early, because you need to answer that question, what's happening? And a strategy for doing that should not be serendipity. So what do we mean by that? Well, accidental discovery of things that may impact the business is not a good strategy. And I'll give you an example of that in a minute. But this is an area where technology has the ability to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And so what would be some of the things that might be involved in doing that? So let's first look at the different types of systems that may be connected to your command center. These could range from HR systems that have information about your employees, travel management that provides information about where your travelers are, certainly access control and video are systems that are likely connected to your command center. There could be other things like visitor management, mass notification systems for sending messages out, even transportation management if your mission is supply chain. So a lot of different systems that are connected to your command center. And at the same time, you've got a lot of data coming in. So Tracy talked about this earlier, there's a lot of intel and data that comes in. And that data can range from intel data to risk event type data to investigation data to even reference and asset data. So a lot of information coming into the command center, and even that asset data can have information about locations that are static, but also many of those assets could be moving. They could be travelers, they could be supply chain assets that are in motion. And so this represents or creates a huge problem for the command center to manage all of this data. And what I often see, having been in over 100 command centers, is I often see that the way that this manifests itself is a lot of noise and a lot of information that where the analysts and the operators are trying to sift through this all to try to put together and create an accurate picture. Now, Tracy, you've managed this function as well. You know, what's your experience? And when you've gone and seen some command centers, is this something you've seen as well? Is it just there's a lot of noise often with all of the information that's now available to us?
Yeah, so intelligence can be your biggest asset, but it can also be your biggest distraction. And so depending on how a command center is set up, so the aggregation of information is critical. But aggregation without deconfliction creates the noise that you're talking about, Scott. And what that means is that if you don't tailor your intelligence feed to what's important to you, you can be overwhelmed with information, so it can be, you know, paralysis by analysis. You won't be able to come up with a path forward because you're just inundated with information. So one of the key things that a command center should be able to do is through either AI or machine learning is when that information is aggregated, use technology to deconflict based on what's important to you. So you put into the system the rules of things that matter to you. Maybe you want to know about terrorism events that happen in a certain proximity to your assets. But maybe you don't care about them on another part of the world where you don't have assets that are at risk. So putting those types of parameters into play in your command center is critical for you to be able to leverage that information.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that really brings us to, you know, what is that challenge? It's really an information architecture exercise. And there's the founder of TED Talks, Richard Saul Wurman, has a great quote when it comes to, you know, how do we organize this information? And he says that the organization of information actually creates new information. And so it's how do we create an environment that's of shared information that's designed particularly for our purpose. And so the better way, as Tracy mentioned, is to really organize that information around your mission. So again, we go back to the first principle of mission. We want to make sure that the information has been filtered, deconflicted, and categorized and organized in such a way where everything that's being served up to my analysts, to my operators, my command center is information that I care about because it relates to my business, my assets, my people, and there are types of events that could impact us. So now we're going to go to our fourth principle. So once we've organized the information, we've done the filtering, we've done the deconfliction, and we've got, you know, a pretty reliable information coming into our command center, we need to answer the next question is, do I care? So that really involves knowing the situation. And in order to do that, you know, and Tracy alluded to this, is we need to be able to let technology do some of this correlation for us. And so if you can think about, you know, the challenges, I've got a lot of these different risk events, and maybe I've now even filtered those to things that might be relevant to me. I've got all of my assets into the system, and I've got those kind of aggregated and organized. Now I need to know, where is there an intersection of a threat to something I care about? And that's really the definition of what we're calling a critical event. Because a threat may not be critical to one organization, but it might be critical to my organization because it impacts my people or my operation. And so an example of this, and we'll just use a scenario of a protest, is that if there's an event that's being reported and I've filtered that and I've gotten, you know, pretty good information about that particular protest or event, I need the technology to be able to tell me exactly, you know, who or what, or, you know, what part of my operation could be impacted. So that might be who I have in the area, my offices, people traveling into that area. I need to know exactly what my potential impact is. And that really involves a capability which we're going to call an intelligent alerting, and the ability to dynamically correlate those risk events with those assets, because both of those things could be moving. So you want to be able to do that correlation and that alerting in real time. So once I know that I've got an event, a threat, and I've done the technology has correlated that to say, yes, that's critical for me. I have people in the area. I have locations in the area. I need to be able to assess that event. I need to provide what's called situational clarity to that critical event. And what that is it's adding context. Another way of thinking about it is having boots on the ground without having to actually be there. And so an example of what that might look like is, if I use my protest example, the ability to then directly from that, without having to go to a separate system or a separate application or open up another screen, I want to be able to look and drill into that event and look at things like, where's the path of the protest? What are traffic conditions look like in case I need to evacuate people out or send someone in or send in vehicles? I need to be able to tap into things like traffic cameras so that I can actually see, is the protest getting larger? Is it getting violent? Maybe even be able to link directly into social media, directly from that event without having to leave. Because remember, time is of the essence. And so what I'm really doing is I'm integrating that contextual data to assess the severity of the threat.
So Scott, one of the challenges with that is if you try to do all of that manually, this is where we go back to the idea of allowing technology to do the heavy lift for you. So when you think about where that intersection between assets and risk events are, and if your machine learning has the capability to aggregate that information and then to do some predictive analysis that talks about leveraging social media and other more verified sources of information and mapping that route, and you can see where your assets are along that route, trying to do that manually does not allow you to keep pace with the changing of events. Leveraging technology to automate that and to bring that stuff into focus for you provides you with the clarity that you need to make informed decisions that will affect not only your organization, your leadership, and the people that are going to be directly impacted by the event.
Yep, that's a great comment. And when it comes to managing these types of events, there's kind of an adage that says the more time you have, the more options you have, and the less expensive those options tend to be. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're really trying to shrink the time to know and the time to act so that we can mitigate or even eliminate the impact of that event. So we've talked about the people in the command center, or the people that are the customers of the command center. We've talked about the systems and the data and the challenge with trying to to organize that. Now we're going to talk about the processes. So, what are the processes in your command center that are going to help you be more successful? And that brings us to our fifth principle, which is once I know early, I know the situation, now I need to know what to do. And that is really involves taking action. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure that, again, thinking about time here, I want to make sure that my response systems are integrated with my my situational awareness and my risk event and that whole knowledge of those threats. I want to have all of that integrated with my response systems so that I can quickly communicate, manage the incident, and do whatever types of reporting that I need to do. So we're going to call that situational execution. And an example of that might be, when I have one of these events, I need to be able to quickly send out communications to a variety of different stakeholders, people that are impacted, maybe people that are part of the response, and maybe even stakeholders like executives that just need to be kept informed. And this can be a huge challenge for organizations to be able to quickly get that information out to the right people at the right time. And so the ability to do this automatically with some pre-built templates is a way to very quickly and efficiently carry out this task.
So Scott, you talk about pre-built templates, and I think that's the key. So, you play like you practice. So there are a lot of events that happen on a routine basis that require immediate notification. Depending on where your organization is, maybe you're in Tornado Alley, where seconds matter. So if you have pre-approved messages that go out to your employees that have already been vetted through corporate communications, through leadership, et cetera, through legal, then you can automatically send those to inform employees of critical events as quickly as possible. But having those built in the system and having them pre-approved, because the hardest thing in a command center is to disseminate information that you might get blocked by corporate communications, you may get blocked by legal. So the more of those that you can create, the better off you're going to be.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. So not only do we need to notify those employees and inform those stakeholders, but oftentimes there's a series of tasks that have to be activated. And so you may be activating a response team, and many of those people may be outside of your command center. So the ability to send out those task lists very, very quickly and then be able to track the progress of all the different steps and tasks that need to take place is also a critical part of that situational execution, of that response to that particular event. So now we're going to get to our sixth principle, which is once we've known early, we know the situation in which answers the question, do I care? We know what to do. We've taken the action. We sent out the communications. We need to know, how did that go? So how it went. And so in order to do that, there's a variety of different pieces of information that we need. We first of all need to know, did the action that we take, was it successful? Did it mitigate or eliminate the threat? We also need to know that for all the different actions we took, how did we do? What went well? What didn't go well? What could we have done better? And we need the ability to not only compile this very, very quickly for that particular event, but we need the ability to also look back on prior events that may be similar to say, look, when we've responded to this type of event, maybe the last 6 or 7 times, 3 of the times our mean time to resolution was cut in half. Well, why was that? Well, it turns out that maybe there was one step we did in those instances that we didn't do in the other instances. So the ability to be able to compare and look at that also allows us to do better next time. So we can build those things into the next time we have to respond.
Yeah, Scott, I think the after action, post-mortem, whatever you want to call it, hot wash, is sometimes the most difficult thing to do, because what you don't want it to do is to devolve into a blame game. So by concentrating on the things that went well and posturing yourself in that light, it allows you to gain partnerships in the organization for folks that maybe had a delayed response when it should have been better. And it's really all in the way that it's communicated, because in my experience, after actions have devolved into heated discussions about performance. That's not the reason for this. The reason is so that you can leverage what went well and then add that into the next time this happens. And I think that the manner in which an after action is conducted is critical to the viability of it and to the success it brings to the organization.
Great. Yeah, that's a great point. You're right. It shouldn't be the blame game. It's how do we all do better as an organization next time. So that's a great point. So we're going to go to our last poll question. So we've talked about kind of the mission, the customers, and we've gone through those key requirements for a command center. And so let's say that at this point we've got a very effective command center. Well, how do you measure the effectiveness of your command center? So here are a variety of different ways that you could measure. Mean time to resolution, so that might be a measurement based on time, measurement based on volume, which is number of cases, money saved or cost avoidance, the ability to contribute to revenues, or none of the above. And we're getting a few more responses in. Very interesting, Tracy.
You know, it is. I mean, it's not too surprising that number of cases handled per week, because it's a metric that everybody can follow, is fairly high. What I'm a little surprised at is that less folks use a metric of either contributing to revenue or return to revenue for the organization, because that's a key factor when it comes time for you to lobby for enhancements to your command center. So I get where they're going with this. I just think that that's something that we may want to chat about as as you leverage the investment in your own command center.
Yep, and that is a great point. And I think this poll kind of illustrates our seventh principle, which is leveraging your investment. So you've made a huge initial investment in your command center. There's an ongoing annual investment. So let's say that we followed the first 6 principles. We've got our command center running, a lot more efficiently. We're aligned around a mission. Our next principle is, how do I take that success and that initial investment and leverage it for even more value? And so, as we talked about earlier, is that, oftentimes these command centers are, they're part of corporate security with a mission of protecting the people and the assets. And so, there are certain, measures that might, measure the success of that. But I think, as Tracy mentioned, the opportunity really is to go beyond that. And, to the extent that my command center can really help ensure my operations and support business continuity, there's a lot more value that can be added, because now it's either keeping the revenues flowing or returning to revenue after a disruption in a quicker way. And then finally, I think that there's an opportunity to leverage that command center even further, which is, can my command center actually help support some of my strategic initiatives so that I can perform better as an organization? So what would be an example of that? Does my command center allow me to have to manage risk in a way that maybe I can gain market share from my competitors who are not as well prepared as we are? Does my command center allow my organization to move into new markets in order to grow my revenues? Because without that support, we wouldn't be able to operate in a risk environment like that. So this is where the command center can really expand its mission, and as we talked about earlier, really elevate the role that it has in the organization to become much more strategic.
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that's accomplished, and we talked about it a little bit earlier. So let's talk about how a command center builds a business case for an enhancement. If you focus purely on security, the chances of you getting the enhancement are not as great as if you articulate the value in terms that resonates with the core business. In other words, we all have, those of us in the security business have our own language. And oftentimes the core business does not understand that language. But if you put it into terms of ROI, if you put this amount of money into an investment, this is what this command center can now do for the overall business. The other piece of this is developing executive champions in the business, not somebody in the reporting chain, but somebody who is responsible for generating revenue for the company. If they can see the value of leveraging a command center, your opportunity to enhance the capabilities is greatly accelerated. So what I would say is learn the business, learn how to build a business case that resonates with the core business, and develop executive champions in that business that can articulate to the board on your behalf.
Great. Excellent point, Tracy. Excellent point. So just a quick review of our 7 principles. The first principle was is to know your mission, and really understanding and aligning that to the core mission of your company. Without knowing your mission, you're not able to do the second principle, which is, with that mission in mind, catering and serving to your customers, the customers that are part of that mission. Then our next 4 principles are really centered on kind of how you manage a critical event, which the first is to be able to know early, making sure that you manage all the information in a way that it's actually valuable to you and it's not noise. Once I know early about potential threats, I need to be able to know the situation, which answers the question, do I care? Are these things that are going to impact my people, my operations, or my assets? Knowing the situation then, I need to be able to quickly know what to do and take action. And remember, time is not your friend in this area. So the more quickly that we can act and act precisely, the greater chance we have of mitigating the impact of that critical event. Then we need to be able to look back and know how it went, being able to create those sit reps and objectively analyze what we could have done better, so that next time we can perform even better. And then finally, as Tracy just mentioned, how do we build a business case to leverage that initial investment to provide more value for the organization so that we can get more investment for our command center function, really elevating the role of that command center beyond security. So we've talked a lot about technology playing a key role in this. And there are platforms that are available. Everbridge has a critical event management platform that helps support these 7 principles, really designed to deal with a variety of different types of critical events, from physical to digital, and being able to quickly go through the process of assessing those threats, being able to locate and identify stakeholders so that you know the situation quickly, being able to integrate execution to act precisely and quickly in response to that critical event, and then the ability to analyze and know how it went, all through a single integrated platform to help reduce that overall time so that the end result is to mitigate and resolve according to your plans. And that platform is always on. So whether your command center is a 24/7 command center or it's a virtual command center, even when your folks are not watching, the technology can be watching for you and even acting depending upon the event, with the ultimate goal of keeping your people safe and your business operations running faster. So at this point, we'll take any questions regarding the presentation.
Thanks, Scott and Tracy, for a great presentation. Before we have our presenters address some questions that have been submitted throughout the program, I wanted to remind you that we would love your feedback in our webinar survey to help improve our program. And now for the first question, what's the best way to get risk alerts that only apply to my operations?
Well, that goes back to the having a capability of what we're going to call intelligent alerting, and that's the ability to be able to filter the risk event data that's coming in and be able to filter that in relation to where your assets are. And I alluded to that earlier. That ability to create those alerts really has to do with setting the system up so that you're only being alerted on the things that impact your assets, and that's actually a huge benefit in reducing the amount of time it takes to know whether or not this is something you care about. So, using that intelligent alerting capability, and again, we have that in our platform, is a huge help to being able to do that.
Right. So aggregation and deconfliction we talked about. The other thing is, let's just say, for example, you have a specific area that you're responsible for or that you're concerned with. If you put a polygon around that area and put that as your risk center, then any risk events that manifest within inside of that polygon, you should be alerted to. So part of it is how you design the rules that allow you to know what you need to know and not be told about things you don't care about. So if you put a polygon around a building that is a critical event and you want a 4-block radius and you put that in there, and any crime or any events that happen within that or could impact that, that allows you to triage automatically what becomes important to you.
Okay, And how big does a company need to be to have a command center?
So
well, Tracy, you've seen a lot of them, and yeah. Go ahead. I'll let you cover that one.
Right. So if you look in the dictionary and the command centers, you'll find a million different examples of what that is. The reality is a command center should be utilized for any size company that you think that is relevant. So if you have a 150-person company and you have a specific mission, your command center can deal with that, and it doesn't have to be state of the art. It can be something very simple, or it can be virtual, which is really great. One of the things, so in full transparency, I was a customer of Everbridge before I came on board. And one of the things I like about that is that the ability to have a virtual command center, because nobody likes to get woken up in the middle of the night being told you need to come to the office. When you can do that on your tablet, it's amazing how much more effective you can be and how much you can leverage technology as opposed to building a people-intensive command post. You don't need as many people as you think if you leverage technology correctly. And I would say that a company that is larger than 150 people absolutely could use one. Some smaller companies could, depending on the product or the service that they provide.
Okay. And could you take a deeper dive into how the command center might work for those who work remotely?
Scott, you want to take first crack and then I'll fill in? Yeah.
Sure. As Tracy said, the technology today, and in our technology, a command center can be deployed anywhere. We have, a command center can be spun up in a matter of, a few minutes in a hotel room with an internet access and a TV screen. It can be on your laptop. It could be on a tablet. So the technology now enables, essentially, as Tracy said, a virtual command center really anywhere, as long as you've got access to, a web browser and the internet, because this is all deployed now in the cloud.
Yeah, let me give you a real life example. A friend of mine is a CSO for a company with about 500,000 people. She does not have a command center. Her command center is on her iPad because she's constantly on the road. So that's the beauty of technology, is that it allows her to manage critical events from wherever she happens to be in the world on that given day. So it's a huge benefit when you think about remote capabilities. I mean, just think 10 years ago, we didn't have this kind of ability. What it does is it allows us to respond faster and more effectively and efficiently than we could have if we relied on a single point of focus for the command center.
Yeah, and I think a real life example of what we're all dealing with today is the COVID-19 situation. Many of us are now working from home to support the social distancing, and so that type of a situation is for this type of a command center now is no problem, because it is virtual. So you've got people that are in organizations that are running our technology that are able to do everything that they can do as if they were in a physical command center. So it's truly a very much of a distributed virtual model.
Okay. And any tips on how we can analyze our past performances and how well we reacted to those events?
Yeah, so let me talk about that a little bit. Having done probably way too many of these post events in my life, what I will tell you is that you want to look at points of success first. So what worked well? And then you want to dissect what worked well and how and why it worked well. So Scott mentioned earlier, maybe you've had 12 events, 7 of them were incredibly successful, the others weren't. What did you do differently in the 4 that you did in the 7 that made it successful? So if you capitalize on the positive and then extrapolate out and figure out how you can leverage that positive action on the 4 or 5 areas that didn't go well, that makes for a much better and more effective after action, whatever we want to call it. So if you do it that way, and the other thing is making sure you have the right stakeholders at the table. So ensuring that everybody, and then create the environment when you start your after action that this is not a blame game. This is not a, why didn't you do this? It's how do we become even more effective than we were this time? And you analyze the past events, determining what worked really, really well, and then figuring out how you transition that to an area that didn't perform as well as the others.
Okay. And for an utility company, considering the huge overlap, would it be prudent to separate the tech and the security command center?
Scott, why don't you start with that, and then I'll add some color.
Yeah, so when you say the tech, so that could be a couple of different things. It could be a network operations center versus a physical security type of a command center. I've seen models both ways. More and more, we're starting to see fusion centers where you're bringing digital and physical security together. There's a lot of advantages, and I'm sure Tracy can talk about some examples to bringing those together. So so you don't necessarily have to keep those apart. And Tracy, I know you've seen and you've been to some and worked with some organizations that have the fusion center approach.
Yeah, let me chat about that. So right now, globally, about 30% of the companies are consolidating digital and physical command centers, and it is definitely picking up steam. Because that gap that exists between the digital and the physical is where vulnerability lives. So by stovepiping those two or keeping them separate, you're creating an environment in which risk and vulnerability can thrive. By horizontal integration between digital and physical, what you're doing is alleviating that risk space. And it also demystifies both sides of the equation for the operators in your command post. I'm a big believer in the consolidation of command posts, number one, for the reasons I just articulated, but also from a budget perspective. There's not really the justification to have two separate centers when you could actually leverage the expertise on both sides of the equation, digital and physical, and create a safer environment for the company. Anybody that feels that there is no correlation between digital and physical doesn't understand that the best route for introduction of malicious malware is through phishing, which is about educating your people on how to leverage their email accounts correctly. So in my opinion, I think one system or one center that covers the risk for the organization is always a better model.
Yep. And that's actually one of the reasons why our platform for managing critical events supports both the digital and the physical, is because we need to support, that coming together of both the digital and the physical world because of those advantages that Tracy just talked about.
Okay. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for questions today. Please join me in thanking Scott Morrison and Tracy Reinhold for their great presentation, as well as our sponsor, Everbridge. If you do have any additional questions or comments, please don't hesitate to click the email button on the console. Please visit securitymagazine.com for the archive of this presentation. It will be available up to a year, as well as other information about upcoming events. We appreciate your time and hope that you have found this webinar to be a valuable experience. Stay safe.